Thank you so much, and I'm super happy to be here at the Games for Change Festival. Today, are here we talk to talk about something that everyone is talking about, the metaverse. But we are going to try to talk something that nobody is talking about, that is the ethics of the metaverse. This is me, Micaela. You can contact me on my socials, and this is a question for everyone at home. How many times have you heard in the last month we are building a metaverse? Or we are entering the metaverse. Every single brand is having metaverse FOMO and is trying to get into this trend from high fashion to governments seeking to build public metaverses. There are a lot of research doing on this field across familiarity across the world with the metaverse, and some countries interesting have rated high in metaverse interest. And some of them are already building public metaverses, like South Korea, that is building a metaverse center with a plan for to start in 2023. Others are seeing the metaverse as a solution for already existing problems like corruption. But our question is, why would be the metaverse different from any other medium of communication? How would it prevent corruption? And the main question is, do we need a metaverse for that? Commercially, the metaverse is becoming kind of a catch-all for transmedia. It's like meaning we have a movie, a t-shirt coming up, a virtual environment coming up. So everything needs to be kind of metaversey, and that's because there is a huge economic opportunity, a 800 billion market coming up, and nobody wants to be out of the metaverse. So for me, it's like a perfected form of capitalism because it doesn't require the physical production of goods, has a tighter control over secondary markets through licensing and intellectual property, but also, and this is something really problematic, is more invasive and intrusive. It's what I call a capitalism of cognitive surveillance. We need to ask several questions when thinking about the metaverse. Why we're building it, coming up with the purpose of this, how is different from current technologies, is talking about the meaning of building metaverses. And this is an important one because of the things we already seen in our current internet. Who can seize control of it? How can it affect our environment? And how can it impact our society and human rights? But beyond the hype, what is a metaverse? You know how it started. The term comes from a novel called Snow Crash, written by Neil Stephenson, and then it has been heavily influenced by pop culture, from Star Trek to The Matrix to Ready Player One to the more recent manifestation of the metaverse, like the Lego movie showcasing different worlds colliding of Free Guy, where I don't want to spoil it for everyone, but where a person or a virtual person lives in a simulated environment. From our gaming side, we have very huge experiences from Second Life with simulated economies, virtual currencies, and user generating content. And interestingly, it has been built with no blockchain involved. Other possible candidates for the metaverse are Animal Crossing, coming from the social side of how people is connecting into gaming, and of course, Decentraland. Roblox and Minecraft are all potential candidates, but also one of the interesting examples is Fortnite, because it's a mixture of it started as a game, but is quickly or slowly becoming into a platform with different experiences that you can have inside the game. And a lot of people is thinking about Fortnite as one of the first metaverses. But how we define the metaverse? There is still no consensus around the concept of the metaverse, and people thinking about it as the successor of the internet, a new internet, the spatial web, or something that is completely different. But for me, we need to think like in those two keys. One is the metaverse is the next iteration of internet because it mixes different elements from internet platforms and video games into one single experience, but also because it adds a new immersive dimension to the existing layers of the internet. We are going from what is called the flat or the 2D internet to a spatial 3D internet called as the immersive web. But in reality, the metaverse is more complex than just going from 2D to 3D. This is what I call the reality gradient because it involves how we experience reality in different ways. We come from a physical reality that is the tangible world that we can touch and perceive through our senses to augmented reality where the information is being overlaid into our physical reality to mixed reality. Think about Jarvis and Iron Man when manipulating objects to a virtual reality space where an artificial reality supplants and occludes our reality. And this is dangerous when we are thinking about times of post truth and people creating conspiracy theories and narratives. So, there is also no consensus of what are the defining characteristics of the metaverse. We are thinking that it's a virtual space that needs to be shared for a lot of people to be there as persistent space, as something that is not going to be going away as you get out of the metaverse and go back again, essentially interconnected. Needs to be an open experience, meaning that a lot of our aspects of our life are going to happen into the metaverse. But at the same time, depending on different philosophies, people is thinking about do we need artificial scarcity in the metaverse, or the metaverse should be a sandbox where everyone can build and create with no limits? How are we going to think about interoperability and connection between different metaverses? And particularly, this leads something. Sorry, that's my cat in the background. She knows a lot about the metaverse too. And particularly, this leads to different philosophies about are we going to build the metaverse? Are we going to create a centralized way, which is the opposite of the things everyone is talking about when talking about Web3? Or are we going to try to build something that decentralized and giving back power to the users? Even though everyone's talking about centralization and decentralization, the thing is like different platforms that are raising to power at different intermediaries are transforming this initial state of creating a decentralized web into going back to the state of different key players having too much power over the system. So, what's my definition of the metaverse? For me, it's a convergence. It's a convergence where you have content and infrastructure, you have digital and physical realities converging, but also technologies and phenomena. For example, when we talk about the technologies, we need to think that the metaverse will be comprised of artificial intelligence, 5G, blockchain, and even neurotechnology in the near future. When it comes to social phenomena, this is going to be a mixture of gaming, internet, and social media, all in a single space. And when it comes to realities, we are going to mix digital and physical realities. Maybe you have heard about the Internet of Things. It's like every single device connected to the Internet is creating data as a byproduct. And that is really important because one of the models of the business models of the Internet is created by exploiting our data and transforming it into surveillance capitalism. So that's why we are hearing to this point where we need to talk about ethics, human rights, and regulation in the metaverse. As there is a convergence of different technologies, there is also a convergence of different regulatory frameworks. We have all the things that we have been researching, talking, and doing in the regulatory space when it comes to artificial intelligence and ethics and the principles that try to regulate how artificial intelligence is going to be implemented in society. But at the same time, three really strong backgrounds when it comes to intellectual property law, because we are talking about digital goods, when we are talking about consumer protection law, because we are going to be users and consumers into these new spaces, and also data protection law, because as we were saying, data is the new oil in internet economy. So another thing that we need to remember is that even we are thinking about it as something completely different, in essence, the metaverse is the internet. So we can think not about one metaverse, but a lot of metaverses connected through different infrastructure and protocols. It's like As we internet has websites, we can think of the metaverse as an architecture connected all the little metaverses that are within it. And I always love to say that we don't want the metaverse to become the bad sequel to the internet. We already know the different internet governance problems that we already have, and they're still unsolved. So we need to create the metaverse thinking about the problems that we already know and trying to not to port it into this new world. So, what's the key ingredient for metaverse success? For me, the key ingredient is connection. And connection means have interconnected systems that can uh, move content from one metaverse to another, which is called content portability and needs and requires technical interoperability, like rendering and portraying one content from one place to another, which is something very, very difficult to do. But also it needs legal interoperability, meaning that we need to have complex contracts in place that allow us to copy and reproduce that content from one metaverse to another, or revise intellectual property law to create different principles when it comes to digital exhaustion. Also, the war of the metaverse will be won for the metaverse that has the more population. Because if you have a metaverse that is just beautiful but no one's inside, it's just a simple world, or it's, if it's not interconnected or you don't have communities in there, it's going to be like a beautiful virtual landscape, but not else than that. So, without interoperability and portability, we will have only virtual worlds, but not a metaverse. And also, we need to be aware of that without this connection, we are reproducing the model of what is called in internet governance wallet gardens. When you have platforms like Facebook that has content that is only within this, and you don't have like bridges or connecting points to other applications where you can move freely from one place to another, this is going to create like different silos or wallet gardens within the internet, which is causing something that we call internet fragmentation. And we certainly don't want this to be reproduced in the metaverse. So, to save the metaverse, we need to avoid repeating past internet mistakes to lead us to this point, and think about building metaverses with a chief ethics officer in mind, with questions like who will control the metaverse, the revenue models that are we're going to sustain different metaverses, and how these revenue models are going to impact in digital rights, and what are the governance, legal, and ethical challenge of creating this. Just remember that the metaverse will try to reproduce our human experience now into digital world. So we need to create worlds that are inclusive, diverse, and don't reproduce the inequalities that we already have. And again, ask really hard and important questions. What are going to be the access points? Who is going to control those access points? How do we ensure net neutrality in the metaverse? And how we have a, a rule to have an open and decentralized metaverse that allows innovation and competition. So again, we need to step away from the surveillance, capitalism surveillance models that we already know that exploit our data, and create what is called a capitalism of cognitive, of what I call a capitalism of cognitive surveillance. So we have different revenue models for the metaverse, and which one of every single one of these has its own strengths and weakness, and we need to carefully think about them when we are trying to build something like this, because it's going to have a huge impact in society, and it's going to have a huge impact in human rights. And not to end, but not the least, we need to think about how are we going to represent ourselves in the metaverse, coming with questions about identity and artificial intelligence and how this is going to interact. Because one of the biggest problems that we already have now in internet is how artificial intelligence is mediating our content and our communications, and creating these phenomena that leads to polarization and filter bubbles. So imagine when in the metaverse, you will be seeing something, and something is going to track the movement of your eyes and convert this very intimate data about you into some content that will be sold through you through different models that can create, I don't know, a human in seconds. Imagine a system that is able, a device, a headset that is able to capture your pulse and kind of through inferences create assumptions about you. Maybe you are seeing someone you like, maybe you are seeing something you want to buy. And using generative artificial intelligence, the systems can create it in minutes and sell it back to you. And this also has questions about the standards of beauty that we see and how are we going to experience body dysmorphia into the metaverse when we are disassociated from our bodies. So, the governance, legal, and ethical challenges for the metaverse are to pay attention and not reproduce the things we already hate about the internet and the problems we already have about the internet, and keep the best things of humanity and translate into this new digital realm. Thank you.